Hi, my name is Moise Mir. I will be facilitating this candidate interview with Katie Valenzuela, who's running for Sacramento City Council District 4, specifically re-election to that seat in 2024. Um, and just the logistics of how this candidate interview is going to go. Katie, we're going to go ahead and give you about 3 to 5 minutes to introduce yourself um, with the starting explanations of what position you're running for, and then what's the size of your district and where is it. And then from there, we'll transition into Q&A for about 20 minutes. So I will, with that, pass it to you, unless you have any questions.
No, that's great. Thank you. Been doing a lot of these lately, so I've got the wrap down, but it's always a little different. But hi, everybody. Thanks for making the time on a Friday night. Katie Valenzuela, I use she, her pronouns. I'm a first term council member in District 4, which has changed because I got elected for the Central City Land Park and a bit of Natomas. And with redistricting after the census, the new District 4 is the whole Central City, the River District, and all of East Sac and River Park. I did get to keep a little bit of Land Park around TV Circle and New Helvetia. Very excited about that. And it's about 60,000 people. So it's a pretty big district, a lot of renters, very unique district in a lot of ways, but frankly, also an incredible district that I'm really honored to represent. So for some background on me, I actually grew up in a town called Oildale, if you believe it or not. That is a real place in California. And came up here to go to school at Davis, Aggies, and study community development, and really fell into environmental justice work through that educational process. I've done education equity work, I've done social justice and food access work, urban agriculture work, but environmental justice is very much what I've been doing and what I continue to do today as a part-time day job with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. I like to joke that, in the city council, I argue with developers, and my day job, I argue with oil companies. So, definitely not a boring existence, but one that I find incredibly fulfilling and really something I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. So in our first term, it was pretty wild because I got elected actually in the primary of 2020 in March. So 3 weeks before the shutdown happened, and then George Floyd was killed, and then it was like one thing, and then December came, and I was getting sworn in over Zoom, like the whole plan's out the door. Like, we don't totally know what's going on. It's an unprecedented level of need and opportunity with all this federal money coming in to really invest in equity, to invest in the workers, to invest in our communities and housing. I'm really proud of a lot of what we've accomplished, though. I mean, whether it's, getting vaccines to workers who weren't going to get vaccine access until much later in the process, to really fighting for the tenant protections. I'm still the only tenant on the council. So really pushing that forward. We have our new proposal, Sacramento Forward, to bring a lot of measures forward, which won't solve it, but will certainly make a good difference. We even have a business plan going for a public bank in Sacramento, which is really exciting. It only took me 2 years to convince the city treasurer that this would be a good idea for our city, given how much capital we have, owning our own water systems, our own water rights, our own investments. I mean, we just have a lot of capital that we don't need on for most days. And so we can make a big difference if we invest that money strategically in our community, I think. So everything from the fights, and these regional boards have just been incredible. It's like, I remember bringing up, we're moving our money at regional sanitation from the county investment pool. And so we were creating an investment policy. And I was like, well, I want to make it clear, since it's a new investment, that we don't invest in fossil fuels. Like, that should be just like an obvious, like, out the gate, let's just not start it and have to unwind it. And it wasn't yelled at. I was sternly talked to by some more experienced council members who said, like, well, we shouldn't be investing on ideological grounds, council member. And it was funny because then they brought in this investment guy to like help us understand. And he actually agreed with me and was like, no, you can make good money on that, like investing in these funds, and let's show you. And I was like, but it's like, really changing hearts and minds on all the little issues, and really excited also in 2024, not just about our housing programs, but our general plan. It's our first environmental justice element, which was a bill I got to work on through state advocacy roles. There are things in there about zoning for grocery stores, about really amateurizing harmful land uses in communities, so that when those lands transition, they don't get to keep doing the thing that they've been doing next to neighborhoods. Like, it's just I feel like Sacramento is at such a precipice of doing some really cool things. And I just want to keep doing that work and keep fighting for the opportunity to make sure Sacramento and especially District 4 stays just the awesome community it is. So good time check, Moise, because I'm actually done now because I'd love to hear from you all. But I will say that I'm now the candidate endorsed by the Democratic Party as well as the Central Labor Council. I got sole endorsements in both of those races, as well as many, many organizations like Planned Parenthood, many Democratic clubs, other unions. The support's just been incredible. And I will just say the support at the doors has been incredible. So I just left River Park, which is actually the neighborhood that my opponent lives in, and also Jeff Harris lives in. And I got to tell you, I had one of my best canvassing days I've had on this campaign. I probably talked to like 24 people. Every single one of them was a yes by the time I left. Several of them said, "You've really convinced me." And a lot of it was about caring for people who are unhoused, wanting real solutions to some of these crises, and just being excited by the energy and enthusiasm that my campaign has generated. So this is an incredibly winnable race, but I'm definitely going to need a lot of help because I still don't take developer money or corporate money, which definitely makes fundraising interesting when you're running against a candidate who's openly saying he'll take money from anybody, even fossil fuels. So I'm definitely excited to be considered talking to you all today, because I'm hopeful, just like we did in 2020, not just with my election, but also with November GOTV. You'll recall, rent control was on the ballot, strong mayor was on the ballot, my bank seat was still open. We were fighting multiple races during COVID, and Sunrise was instrumental in helping us get those door hangers out, doing lip drops all over the city to make sure people understood what these things meant. And we weren't successful on rent control. We did beat strong mayor, but I think we have a lot of really great work ahead of us still. So thank you again for the time.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. We're going to transition into question and answer. Before doing so, I do want to just preface, I forgot to, I guess, announce to our viewers that, yeah, we already have your responses from your candidate questionnaire submitted, and you kind of touched on some of those answers in your introduction as well. And yes, you were our endorsed candidate in the 2020 primary, as we were just a fledgling organization at the time. And so our first question, again, this is kind of coming to you as an incumbent, but still, I think we want to hear your answer, and especially what you're up against in your strategy is, are you running to win? And assuming so, what is your plan to win this race?
Our strategy has really been grassroots canvassing. There's taking office during COVID comes with a lot of challenges, not the least of which is that you're rarely seeing people in person to kind of defend yourself so that they get to know you. And so a lot of people have been reading, really unfavorable press about me or really awful next door posts. And so the best way to combat that is really to talk to people directly. Like I flipped probably at least 2 people today who were already negative against me just on those posts. And then by the end of the conversation, we're like, you know what, like I actually really support what you're saying. I don't know where this other stuff's coming from. And I was like, yay. But that's like door by door by door. And I find the volunteers are incredibly, like just really compelling to people, because it's not just you saying what I would say, but you're also out there on your own time. It's not me going to the door fighting for my job. It's somebody else saying, hey, I'm spending my time walking for this person because I think her vision is important. And that's been incredibly compelling. We have done a really good job with fundraising so far. We were spending it almost as fast as we're getting it, but we've already raised almost $70,000, all from grassroots donors and unions and Democratic clubs. And so we're going to I have 2 more big fundraisers planned, several meet and greets, but we're getting creative with like a meet and greet at Capitol Books, which is also surrounded by a ton of gated apartment buildings. And so now we get to call and text all those apartments and say, hey, come to this meet and greet. And that's another touch for us with them. The unions are going to help with a lot of lip drops. And we're just really going to count on that grassroots momentum to get across the finish line. But in the end, it's the message too. My message compared to my opponent's message is one full of hope and full of solutions, when his is a lot more about fear and enforcement and punishment. So people really resonate with our message, and the more we can get that to people. We have an incredible digital team headed up by Skylar Henry, who's been making all my videos and doing really cool content. We've got someone right now working on illustrations. We're actually trying to make our own AOC inspired video where we really talk about the vision for Sacramento with animation, like with illustrations that really demonstrate what it looks like if I was was really able to wave a wand and make things happen the way I hope they could happen. So really trying to be a message of positive and hope in a time of a lot of frustration and sadness, especially when it comes to our housing crisis. So that's our big strategy.
Okay, thank you. And again, in that answer, you touched on some of our upcoming questions. As someone who's kind of been in office, we're kind of trying to explore broader questions than just the usual ones. But again, as an elected official, I do want to touch on some of that area of challenges that you mentioned coming into office. What has been either like your top or like a big regret that you've had as a council member, or what's something that you came into office expecting to be able to do, but haven't yet? Um, and into that latter part, if you could expand even on why and what some of those barriers were to that progress.
Yeah, I have two answers for that. I mean, my biggest regret was, I think, in my first 6 months of office, really culminating in the lawsuit against Skylar when I brought him onto my team. And if folks don't know about that, definitely Google it. It was a wild time. I don't think I slept for like several days in there. It was awful. But that first 6 months in office, I still believed, I was starting to fall to believe the lie that political capital was like a thing, that maybe if you just do this little thing that we just need you to do, just be that vote, we'll help you on something else. And that's really a harmful narrative that happens to a lot of electeds. And thankfully, I finally had the water splashed on my face with Skylar's lawsuit, because I realized not only was there no political capital to build with some folks that, in fact, like they were just opposed to what I wanted fundamentally. That there was nothing I was going to do that was going to make them okay with moving money from the police department to social services, right? Like there's nothing that I was going to do that was going to get them to the point where I could make progress on the big issues I really wanted to make progress on. And so that was the moment that I was like, hey, wait a minute. It's like someone like kind of like pulled back the shades, and I was like, wait a minute, like, what am I doing? But in that first 6 months, I did vote for the city manager's pay increase, for instance, which is something that I do regret to this day. It's and that was a vote that was made purely because I believed that I was building a relationship that obviously I didn't build, because a few months later they were suing my staff person to keep him out of the building. So, I think that it was a hard lesson, but it was one I was glad I learned early. And before more harmful things were done, I think, like we had, yeah. So I will stop there because there's a whole lot of anecdote there in terms of things that happened in the first 6 months I was in office. But I will also say the issue that's been most intractable for me has been the police related issues. It's something that I knew would be hard, but I didn't expect this much resistance. I really thought that like we would have had at least the reconciliation stuff started by now, if not like at least some process on the police commission recos that made sense. And granted, we're still working on that. Like it's not like it's gone. It's just like it's been 3 years and we're still talking about how do we move these police commission recos forward. And a lot of those recos aren't even the big systems change stuff that we really need to be talking about to build trust and to figure out what role, if law enforcement should and shouldn't play. So that's been incredibly intractable. And the budget stuff has just made me crazy. Like I really thought in that first budget, when I started asking questions about metrics and definition of success, that everybody would be like, whoa, we need to figure this out before we move forward. And everybody's like, no, it's fine. Like we're cool giving you $200 million without having any of these metrics tied to it. It was just incredible because they all were preaching about that for everything else, especially the youth serving programs. But when it came to police, it was like cool that they were getting 20, 30 million more dollars and nobody was going to explain why. So that's been incredibly frustrating and something that I'm continuing to reevaluate from a strategy perspective with my police commissioner and other stakeholders to figure out like what is the new angle we can try to really shake loose this somewhat like Stockholm syndrome that seems to be happening with some of my colleagues and when it comes to issues related to the police.
Thank you. And to that question of what is the strategy moving forwards? That is our next question. As someone currently on the council who's been outspoken on various issues, as you just named, often in the minority position of 7-2 and even 8-1 votes. One of the key factors that, again, as you just identified, determines, constrains, and frames the entire city operations is the city budget. And so one way or another, in this election, we'll have a new mayor and potentially have some new council members. And so this is a two-part question. A, in a world in which the city council dynamic does not get better, stays the same, or even tilts further from your positions after the election, how do you approach achieving substantive transformative change? And feel free to dive in, or I can also say the second part of that is in a world in which there are big changes to the council dynamic after the election. So that there is a huge shift in dynamic. What does that like most positive vision look like to you, and what do you dream about accomplishing?
Well, gosh. Yeah, I do have some nightmares about what happens if the votes go the other way for some of these open seats. Uh, and I have dreams about what happens if it goes the right way. So I will start with I mean, I guess when it comes to the budget, I mean, you know, because Moise, you were a part of the people's budget early on, but was really proud to be a part of getting that started in Sacramento and really building people power. I think the organizing that started there is something I'm interested in continuing to build. I also am with every passing month getting a little bit more data from the police department, which is something that I'm so close to getting enough to really tell a compelling story, I think, about what's been happening with tens of millions of dollars that are frankly unaccounted for within the department. And there's some audits, like we've been able to work with our auditor, who is an independent charter officer. He does not report to the city manager. There are some audits going on that are going to be really important to that. And so we're just chipping away, because eventually you get through the brick wall, right? If you just keep chipping away. And I do hope that that continues, because I do think, even talking to fairly conservative folks, I was having coffee with an East Side guy who really, they're pretty, him and his wife are pretty conservative. And this is one thing that he was like, yeah, this is crazy to me, you know, that you don't, like, you're asking budget questions and you can't get answers and you're expected to vote for it. I'm like, nobody else would expect that for any other budget item except for the police, right? And so the narrative and all of that has been important. When it comes to the future of the council, if it goes the other way, frankly, I will continue doing what I'm doing now, which is not a position I like being in terms of being the one vote or the one of two or three votes that says no. But I have found that the council office in and of itself is a powerful platform, and getting reelected is going to send a powerful message to a lot of people who think that I don't represent the city's beliefs on issues. So I will continue. I'm comfortable being the one vote outside. I'm comfortable that I will continue to be able to get things done for the district. We've gotten a lot done for this district, like millions of dollars in investments, new broadband access and CV Circle. I mean, we have really moved the needle because we're focused on the details and we follow through, and we're building relationships with outside stakeholders. And so I am confident that I will keep being able to do the work under any future scenario. But yeah, I'm prepared to continue to be that, stand on the platform and say the thing as often as I need to, because the other option is just not acceptable in terms of going with the flow in that circumstance. But I do dream, oh man, I dream, which is why I've endorsed Flo for mayor, which is a risk. And it's something that a lot of people advise me not to do, because it's like, well, what if one of the other guys wins? And now and I'm like, look, I mean, it's somebody I beat for office. It's somebody I have zero relationship with. And it's somebody who, frankly, I think agrees enough on values that I'll be able to work with no matter what. So it's like, I'm like, Flo is clearly, I have seen what the mayor can do, and I've seen what happens when he doesn't do what he can do. And I think there's so much that can be done with setting the agenda, not just for open session, but for closed session. Like, there are times that I've been begging the mayor to call a closed session so we can hold the city manager accountable for something, like something's going awry and he's meeting with people and kind of seeding his narrative. And I'm like, mayor, call him into closed session, make him say it to all of us. Let's get this right now. And he'll be like, no, I'll talk to him. And I'm like, no, like, there are mechanisms. Part of why I oppose strong mayors, because there is a mechanism in the charter that allows for oversight, and it's called the city council. You know, like, use us to really call the question, because I feel like some of us are getting different information and we should sort this out. So I think there's a lot she's going to be able to do to set the agenda. And I say she, because my future scenario is Flo wins. If Flo wins, I think that we're going to be able to bring really push the questions, and really get to the bottom of some issues in a strategic way. She has demonstrated through this campaign what she is capable of doing in terms of organizing, and she's blown my expectations out of the water. And so if she wins, I really, really am excited to think about what could happen in terms of change on the city council. Yeah. I'm like, I just think about it. Like, can you imagine a council with Lola Dice? I'm like, yes, I can. Actually, and it's a beautiful sight.
Okay. Thank you for envisioning with us some dreams and nightmares. Um, on this note about the dais and kind of the engagement with the public. So the opposite side of the dais. The city recently has moved backwards on accessibility by removing the option for live remote public comment. And some have criticized the city's ability to even just functionally convene public space, while others criticize the adherence to decorum as a tool to silence public dissent, criticism, and protest. What are your thoughts on this and recent decisions, such as the appointment of a decorum officer in the city clerk? And more generally, how do we make city hall government meetings and the local political process more accessible in general?
Well, the thing that well, there's a lot that sucks about the format of city council meetings, but it's really not conducive for discussion. The Brown Act requires things be agendized, like there's a whole back and forth thing. And so something I've been pushing for a while, which hasn't been nobody believes will help, is I'm like, if we had more spaces outside of city council meetings where people could talk to us and we really could like workshop issues, that I think would really help take the pressure down a little bit, from the council meetings themselves, right? Like if people knew, for example, and I'll tell you all because it was on the police commission's agenda, so it's going to happen. Where like we've asked Rick Jennings and myself and the mayor of the police commission if they want to do a joint workshop with us, something that would be publicly noticed, where everybody would be there. And we've made very clear we don't want this to be what the priority setting workshop was, which was basically like a city council meeting in this convention center. And a lot of you weren't there, and it wasn't even live stream, which was super weird, which we didn't know wasn't going to happen literally till we got there. And we were like, wait, where's the live stream? But they literally set the tables up in the convention center like the dais. Our names we were sitting in the order of the dais. The public was sitting away from us, and nobody got a chance to give any public comment till the end, even though a couple of times I mentioned, like, should we not hear from, like, the whole point of this was to be a workshop, like, why aren't we hearing from the public? So I think that that's a mechanism we could totally use. And yeah, it would need to be publicly noticed, but that would be the whole point, would be to bring in the public to really have more dialogue spaces. And it's something that I know a lot of folks don't have faith in the truth and reconciliation process, but part of what I have been pushing, why I've been pushing so hard for that is I'm like, there are real harms that have happened. And like, we need to figure out a way to at least start talking about that in a format that isn't a 2-minute comment during council. Like we need to create a space for them to know that we will be there, that we will have this conversation and give it the time and space it needs so that we can both take some of the tension off, but also really start to think about what moving forward even looks like from a justice lens, which is a big ask for most of my colleagues because they don't know what most of the things I just said mean. So, and I'm not saying that to say there's malintent among most of them. I'm just saying like they're not organizers. They don't really know what it looks like to sit down with community and have a true reconciliation process. But like I'm someone who believes in restorative justice over like carceral systems. And I'm like, we need to have ways to work through these experiences and these tensions that are healthy, that honor the experiences of people in a different way than them talking to us while we sit on a dais. So that's one thing. I will say when it comes to the Zoom, that was not an easy decision. And it really came from the fact that it was the only idea that came out after we talked to cities all over the state, who had a similar problem happening, which was people calling from out of the city to say racist and bigoted and just awful things during council meetings. They said the only thing that's worked was to cut off the Zoom and, break the cycle, and you can bring it back. And, like they might not notice that it's brought back, but like that was kind of the only idea. And so far it seems to have worked. It sucks that there isn't more we can do, and we asked, believe me, I called, and I didn't just ask the city attorney, I called other attorneys who normally are suing the city to be like, tell me a way that we can stop these comments from happening. And they were like, Katie, there is no way. And all the ways that they were exploring would have been things that would have blown back on other offensive comments that the council didn't like, which includes justice-centered comments and comments from people that people would say, gosh, this is offensive to me, or this, I don't feel safe. And now we're cutting them off too. So like there was this double-edged sword aspect of what was happening, is I was hearing ideas behind the scenes that I'm like, that's unacceptable, both because I don't think it'll work, but also because I can easily see how this is going to get used against people who are more left, who are fighting for people, not to hate people. So that was the best approach. That was the way to dissuade the tension, to pull that back, because I was seeing more draconian measures coming forward, and the solution we could all agree on was getting rid of the Zoom. Like, let's get rid of the Zoom and see if we can get them to stop calling in, and then we can talk about bringing it back at the end of the year in January and just sort of ease back into it. But it sucks because it was a great tool for interpretation. It was a great tool for public access, for public comments. I mean, it checks all the boxes, but we don't have enough tools for this, and it's something that we need to figure out, because every other option is just not good. It's just not good. The decorum officer, I actually also agreed with, because I think it would be a little bit more unbiased than the mayor doing it, because you notice that some people he cuts off and some people he didn't. And so it was like one of those things that we're like, look, if we're going to have standards, you need to apply them equitably. It can't just be like, because you don't like what one person is saying. So that was a way to sort of take some of the emotion out of some of this, especially if someone's directing a comment at the mayor. It was difficult for him to not respond or have something else happen. And so like moving that to Mindy was intended to create a little bit more of like a neutral party. But I know folks don't like Mindy for a variety of things, but I will say that of all the city staff, she has always been the one who has been most accessible and most fair to me and my team. And so, she does try to be as balanced as she can be. I mean, even when Skylar's lawsuit was going on, like, she still came in and briefed him. She came in person to give him the ethics. I mean, like, she went above and beyond to make sure he felt welcome. And we noticed that. And we're just like, whoa, like literally everybody else in the city doesn't want this guy here, but like, you're going out of your way to make sure he feels okay. And that was a big deal to me. So sorry, I went way longer than I expected to, but I think the whole idea of decorum, and when we know it's a white supremacist culture notion, and it's something that I find really objectionable. I really don't like, even when they start tamping down on like people responding. So I'm like, that's like a very cultural thing for a lot of communities, is to respond when someone says something you like or don't like. Like, that's like a very give and take way that almost every other community does, except for, some communities. So it's that's been tough, but yeah, I appreciate the need to have some level of standards so that the business can get done. But I'm also like, I don't know if we've really stepped back and evaluated that from an equity lens, and it's on the list of things to look at for sure.
Okay. I think that takes us to about closing time. I think I'll maybe give you like a final 30 seconds if you have any closing thoughts, and we can wrap from there.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if I talked too long and nobody got a chance to ask questions that they might have had, but really honored again that you took time on a Friday night. Hopeful for your support. We're getting ready to print our lit again for probably the last time, and then we'll just start reprinting to get us through GOTV. But really hopeful that I can work with Sunrise again in this space, and hope no matter what that we keep the door of communication open as always, and so that we can keep building towards the stuff we all want to see. So thank you again.
Okay, and then just a final closing note on process. After tonight, we'll have a 48-hour voting period, and then from there, we'll let you know by the end of the weekend. And with that, we'll close.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.